As the holidays roll in, joy isn't the only thing that shows up. For many people, this season brings a quiet heaviness. Whether you're experiencing a brain injury or a caregiver, and everything from empty chairs, unfinished conversations, and the people we wish were still here. Today, we're talking openly about holiday grief, why it hits so hard, and how we can move through it with compassion, strength, and hope.
Mary Ellen Miller is a registered nurse and retired nurse educator. Her personal experience with grief began over 40 years ago when her infant daughter passed away in a neonatal intensive care unit. After this, she had another pregnancy loss before she was blessed to have Ashley, that's me, at full term. She is also the author of Secret Sorrow, and it all starts in 30 seconds.
Hardest days, hope still burns, it won't retire. This is me, my life rewired. I was broken, now I'm whole. Wrote new chapters for my soul. Not the end, just re-inspired. This is me, my life rewired.
Welcome to Life Rewired. Today we are so grateful to have a very special guest. You're going to find out in 1 second why she's in my phone contact as Mom. Ashley, would you like to introduce today's guest?
Today's guest is my mom, Dr. Mary Ellen Miller.
Welcome to the program.
Oh, thank you so much, Rob and Ashley, for hosting me.
Oh, our pleasure. And no better guest to talk with us today about today's topic of holiday grief. She is the author of, remind me, Ashley, because the title just ran out of my head.
Secret Sorrow. And there's like a subtitle, right?
Yes, grieving and healing as a non-grandparent in a grandparenting world.
Thank you. I didn't want to mess it up.
That's all right.
You would think that Sister would have the title of the book down, right? So anyway, let's get right to the topic at hand, because today we want to talk about this serious topic. We all go through it at the holidays, especially if you have a brain injury, if you're a caregiver to someone that's got a brain injury, or if you're experiencing loss. So Mary Ellen definitely wrote the book about this topic. So Mary Ellen, let's throw it over to you.
Well, thank you. Well, as I mentioned in my title, the term non-grandparent, my book is focused on people who desire to be grandparents, and for whatever life circumstances, that's not part of their life pathway. But people who have read the book who are not in that category, people who have lost loved ones, a few of my friends and even strangers have contacted me who've gone through other losses, and they've said my book's been very helpful to them because I do have chapters that address loss and grief, different grief theories, the difference between grief, bereavement, and mourning, etc. And I also include many citations, over 60 citations throughout the book, so people can go and find additional information if they want to, look up something further on that particular topic. Right. So with the holidays approaching, and we just went through Thanksgiving, there's so many traditions that are associated with holidays that, I truly feel that holidays, of all the time frames throughout the year, except for if you're talking about a personal loss, that person's birthday or an anniversary date would be very, very difficult. But it seems like out of all the other time frames during the year, the holiday season, whether you celebrate Christmas, Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, any other holiday, it just seems that holidays can really bring about a lot of sadness, a lot of blues, and some people even progress even further that they really need to seek professional help. So I just thought that this would be a good time to discuss maybe some good coping mechanisms, or maybe why we feel the way we feel around the holiday season.
Absolutely.
Yeah. What are some of the great coping techniques that you have found that's been successful?
Well, one thing I'd like to point out right away is that everybody's grief is different. There's nobody that grieves the same way with the same type of loss. Like two people could lose a spouse or a best friend or a pet, and they are totally grieving, differently. I've read a lot of work from Dr. David Kessler, who studied with Dr. Kubler-Ross, and he's done a lot of work with grief. And he really strongly promotes that mantra. You know, your grief is your grief, and it's different than anybody else's. So that's one thing that we do have to remember. And another thing I think contributes to the holiday feelings is if you live in certain areas of the world, in certain areas of our country, like we're on the East Coast, we have the time change and it gets dark starting
Yeah.
in November up till March. It gets dark around 5 o'clock in the evening. So I think that whole sundowner syndrome where people feel like, sad or disconnected really kicks in. Um, and then holidays are rich with tradition. No matter what holiday we're talking about, it really is something that people tend to celebrate year after year the same way. Oh, I always go to my mother's, I always go to my brothers, my sisters, my cousins for this particular holiday. Or we always gather for a church service first and then we do this. And so that's why when if someone has a brain injury or is caring for someone with a brain injury, maybe this year they won't be able to go to the church services because the music will be too loud,
Right.
or the lights, the decoration with the lights
Mhm.
might be too much sensory stimulation for them. And so
Exactly.
that can really cause feelings of sadness and trauma for that reason.
Hmm.
And then for people who have had a physical loss of someone, no matter who it was in their family, friend circle, as I said, even a pet, loss of employment, loss of a dream, like I had when I thought I was going to be a grandmother, and my daughter and her husband had a pregnancy loss. Um, you just, your whole world then changes and your worldview changes, and so you really have to adapt and find ways to move through this life circumstance that you didn't think was going to be your pathway right now.
So the people that are experiencing that, I mean, like the brain injury people, there some churches do offer online services, which is,
Hmm.
I mean, it's not the same, but you're still able to attend the service. That's a great asset. But for like the people that are experiencing like the death of a spouse or a brother, sister, mother, father, whatever, um, how does that? How do you get them to without trying to force toxic toxic? I can't speak today. Sorry.
Toxic positivity?
Thank you, Ashley. How do you get? How do you communicate to them without coming across that way? Because you don't want to say, "Hey, you need to get over it."
Hmm.
How do you insert yourself to gently let them know that you're still there for them?
Hmm.
How do you approach that?
Well, I think it's really important to have these conversations well before the day comes. Like if you're talking about Thanksgiving like we just had, and it was always at mom's house and now mom's not here, or any of the holidays that are around, the December into the New Year type season.
Yeah.
The day of the event is not the day to bring up the subject. I think you shouldn't hide away from it. It shouldn't be the elephant in the room that you don't talk about the person who's no longer there on that holiday. You really should.
Hmm.
But the conversation should begin before it, just so that I had a conversation with a family member very recently about Christmas because it was a holiday. And Ashley, I'm sorry you don't know this conversation yet, but it was a holiday that was always celebrated at Ashley's aunt and uncle's house, and the aunt passed away in my husband's sister in June. But her husband is going to have Christmas celebration this year because he feels that that's going to help him. That's going to help him with the day. It's going to give him things to do, people to come over and be with him and his boys. But see, everybody has to make a decision based on their own um, preferences and their
Hmm.
own way of coping. A family should never expect, like, oh, they always host Christmas, and so they're going to host it again for sure when there's
Yeah.
been a tragedy in the family. Um, or New Year's Eve, oh, we always travel to so and so's house for New Year's Eve celebrations. And, you really can't make that assumption that that's going to happen this year. So I think that's one of the main things to do to bring up conversations well before the actual holiday, whatever the holiday is, and
Right.
then to then do something maybe that would be very memorable um, at the actual day of the event. Like I've maybe you've all read these kind of things too. That like you set a place at the table for the
Mm.
person who's no longer there, or you maybe don't set the place, but you have that chair. You know, you pull up the extra chair. Um,
Yeah.
you light a candle in memory of that person. So there's
Yeah.
different ways that different individuals and families find comforting,
Hmm.
and you really need to have conversations with the people who are most affected by the loss, who are the closest to that person. It doesn't have to be a blood relative; it could be their best friend, um, to get their input and not to just make the assumption, you know, that oh, this is going to be this way this year. So that's I think that's one way of helping. But grief is all around us. Every single one of us
Yes.
has some degree of grief at different points in our lives. And I actually included a quote in my book. Every chapter, I have a small quote at the beginning of the chapter that corresponds to what the information the chapter is going to be. And in my one particular chapter where I talk about finding courage to talk, to speak up about your sorrow, I
Hmm.
use a quote from John Steinbeck, East of Eden. And he said, nearly everyone carries a box of sorrow shared with no one. And I
Mm.
thought, that's really true. We don't know
It
what our
is.
neighbors and our coworkers and our friends
Hmm.
are going through if they're not going to say what it is. And from my own personal life experiences, I certainly could raise my hand and say, I certainly did that. I try not to do that as often anymore, but people do carry sorrow,
Hmm.
internally. So,
And
Oh,
since
absolutely.
grief is I know it's, there's the 5 stages of grief, but I feel like it's more of an ebb and flow process. Sometimes that box just kind of sits on a shelf in a closet and isn't touched, and other times it's taken out and rummaged through, and
hmm
you know
Hmm.
um so I mean, somebody could be perfectly fine like a month before that upcoming holiday, and then that holiday hits and they're not fine, or they might have preparations that they do want to celebrate, but then decide at the last minute
hmm
they don't want to celebrate just because it hits them that day. So, going back to understanding that everybody's grieving process is different, I think it's a very important point, and I really do like that quote, Mom.
thanks,
Hmm.
Ashley. I liked what you said about rummaging through the secret box. It's true. Yeah. Like
Yeah.
times that you can bring
Mm-hmm.
things up and times you can't. And then you brought up a really good point too about what if on the day of the event that person just changes their mind. So people have to be very open to being flexible
Yeah.
and going along with some type of a plan B.
Hmm.
Or if you're the one, like let's say I'm hosting some holiday gathering and I expect, 10 people, 12 people to come. And then that day I get a call from a couple that they can't, that it's just not, and maybe they won't even feel strong enough to call me. Maybe they'll text me to say, I'm having a bad day today. Like, you really have to be open minded and compassionate enough to realize that, whoa, the last thing that you would want to do is put pressure or guilt on that individual
Exactly.
or people to come to your holiday gathering.
That whole concept of the shoe being on the other foot, how would you
hmm
feel if you were in that position?
hmm
I feel like people with brain injuries, we always have to have a plan B,
hmm
especially those of us that suffer from like the barometric pressure changes. So if it ends up snowing or raining and you're affected by that, you might be, confined to a bed with a migraine. So you can't go do your
hmm
Christmas plan, for example. So, yeah, definitely being understanding and compassionate and knowing, grief could change at any point,
hmm
or understanding the person that does want to celebrate because they want to continue that tradition. They want to feel that sense of normalcy. They want to honor that person's legacy. So,
hmm
absolutely.
hmm
Got to be
Yeah.
flexible and understanding.
It's true.
Hmm.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You said a mouthful there, Ashley, especially with the barometric pressure change. And two, whenever the holiday comes up with a brain injury, the added stress is going to
Hmm.
just amplify your symptoms.
Hmm.
Hmm.
So you have to keep that in mind as well. Another point I'd like to make is I had recently spoke to someone who also, Marilyn, I think you know them as well, Dr. Karen Kramer
Yes.
from Inner Peace Press as
Hmm.
well. Um, we don't want to just focus on that first year because you always hear the thing that they say, oh, the first year is the hardest.
Right.
It's not true
Hmm.
because think about it. The first year you have family supporting you, bringing you a few meals,
Hmm.
calling you, texting you, what have you. And then after that first year, they just kind of assume that everything is going great. So when that second anniversary rolls around, you're kind of stuck by yourself to just kind of deal with it. And so we
Hmm.
forget about that. So we
Right.
should be mindful that we to check up on people after that
Hmm.
first year as well.
That's right. And there's literature that supports that. I don't have a study to cite, right now to tell you, but from my previous readings, yes, it's the future years that go on that are just as difficult, just as painful. Oftentimes, too, it's because the reality has set in. Like for that
Hmm.
first year, uh, maybe someone's loss or someone's brain injury happened in October or November, so those first winter holidays are almost like a blur because everything was fast and furious. And
Yeah.
as you said, the support is there. And then the support does dwindle over time for most people. So
Hmm.
then that second year and the third year, yes, very difficult. Um, I know myself, my parents were older when they passed away. I was very fortunate to have them into my 50s, and many people don't have that. They have,
Right.
children lose their parents. And
Hmm.
I'm typically, I'm quote unquote good now over the holidays when I don't have my parents around. But every now and then I'll have a day that just, wow, really, it just really hits me. Like
Hmm.
maybe, and that's the other thing, a trigger can be for anyone. It could be a song that they hear on the
Exactly.
radio, or a movie that's playing on TV, or something that, really reminds you of the time that you spent with someone that was meaningful. And then that can be just enough to, make you have a not so good day. And so
Right.
hopefully that's another key point too, is to have um, at least one, if not two or three, circle of friends, circle of family members who are really, really close, that you can call when you are having an out of the ordinary day, or a day that surprises you because maybe you've been feeling pretty good for 6 months, in terms of whatever the loss was, whether it was the loss of your quote unquote typical self before the brain injury,
Hmm.
or whether it's a loss of a human or a pet. Um, and then all of a sudden, out of the blue, something triggers a
Yeah.
response that you didn't expect.
Hmm.
So that it's really very important to have like your village, or just even if it's one or two people that you can reach out to
I just put, I found a resource in the chat box from a grief counselor that talks about how many people reach out to her after the first year. So maybe we
mm,
could put that in our link below, Rob, when we post this to our websites this way if
Yeah.
people want to check that out.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Ashley. Thank
You're
you so
Be sure,
welcome.
much.
be sure to text that to me because I'll forget. So getting back to basically the triggers, um, it's amazing that the first several years it's very hard, and then it gets to the point to where things are kind of you have you've got to that point where you're accepting things, and then just out of the blue, a smell, something you see, or any trigger just
Hmm.
brings that emotion back, and you're thinking, wow, I thought I was over all this, but then here we
Right.
are again.
Correct.
And I will say this too. I teased earlier in the program about you being in my phone as mom. When Ashley had shared your contact with me, she just shared your contact. Well, it came across as mom. And I think
Because
Ashley thought it
that's
was
how it comes across an iPhone to iPhone.
right. So Ashley thought that was weird. And I said, oh, I'm going to keep it as mom. And she's like, "That's kind of creepy." I'm thinking, after I explained it to her, she's like, "Oh, that was sweet." But
I'm
I said,
happy to be in. I'm happy to be in your phone as
Well,
mom.
she's also happy to know that you will be donating a kidney to her if she ever needs one because you
"Hey,
accidentally sent her that text that was meant for Sheila's mom.
did I really? I forgot all
Yeah,
about that."
yeah, yeah.
So
Because I
yeah,
texted you back. I was like, "Did you mean this?" And you're like, "Oh no, no, I'm sorry."
because it said mom.
Yeah.
So it's nice to know that you have a kidney just on the
Yes.
standby.
Yes.
But yeah, I thought, it was just kind of nice to be able to get a text from mom every now and then. So that's why I
Hmm.
wanted to keep it in the phone as mom. So
Uh,
you'll never be in my phone as Mary Ellen. It'll always be
okay.
mom.
That's. I'm above board with that. That's fine.
Okay. So Ashley, did you have anything else that you wanted to comment on? Oh, wait a minute. I wanted to ask you. Your mom had brought up earlier about, your aunt's passing away and how things were going to be different this year. And since this is still kind of fresh, I wanted to get your fresh perspective of how your emotions feel about all this.
Um, 2025 has been difficult in terms of losses. Um, we had a coworker that passed away unexpectedly in February. A month prior to that, my cat passed away. My aunt passed away in June. I lost a client in October. So it's been a whole, roller coaster of losses. So I'm trying to just brace myself. I'm one of those people that as it gets closer, even the day of, it tends to be harder as opposed to like this is too advance notice. But knowing my family, I do think my aunt would have wanted my uncle to continue the tradition of hosting Christmas, and Christmas was always a special holiday at her house. So I'm glad that they will continue to do that because I actually think if we had it at somebody else's house, I think the grief would have been too much for all of us. So
Hmm.
it gives us that even though she's not there, um, you know, it will feel like she's there. So I think I'm hoping that the grief will be less intense.
Yeah, because you'll still be kind of around that normalcy.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. It's not things changing.
Hmm.
Hmm. Yeah, it's just a lot of change for one at one time because first of all
Hmm.
you have to deal with the loss, and
Hmm.
then let's just completely change the routine too.
Now, if my uncle didn't want to host it, like I would completely understand,
Yeah.
but I do feel like he is making the right decision for him and his family. And, you know, a lot of times people are good about honoring wishes and thinking of what the person who's deceased would want, but other times they're not. And it's more like, well, what makes it easier for me? So
Right.
I'm glad he was able to think about what she would want as well.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And that does you make it bring up a great point. You have to also consider who's still with us and how that's going to affect them as well. And I'll give you a great example. When my mother was in the hospital in hospice, um, she wanted to go home, but she really wasn't able to go home. It was
Right.
just impossible. I can't remember if I wrote about this in my book or not, but if I did, please forgive me for double speaking. But my dad really didn't want her to come home because he said if she comes home and passes away at the house, I have to sell the house. I cannot stay there. And I mean, what do you do? Because you got two parents. One wants to die at home. One doesn't want them to die at home. But it just kind of worked out for dad because there was just physically no way that he could have taken care of her.
Hmm.
And the hospital was the best choice really for her. A lot of relatives got upset about that because they wanted her to go home to die, but they were not taking consideration what the best quality of care was for my mother, as well as the mental state of my father.
Right.
So, yeah.
Well, and plus, I understand what you're saying about the relatives and what they wanted, but they come in and come out. You know, your father would be the 24/7 person.
Right.
Like, even if a relative came and stayed for 8 hours, that's not the full picture of
Mm-hmm.
what the care needs are. And home hospice is a wonderful end of life choice for families who are able to, have the capability. We did with my mom and my dad at home, but for other families that, like, it's the care level care is too high, or
Right.
I recently, a friend's husband needed um, medication that had to be administered in the hospital, um, with the hospice team and not at home. So it was just better that he was in the hospital setting, and he was only there about 48 hours before he passed away.
Well, some hospitals say too that the person may not survive the ride home. Is that
Well, that's
really a
true.
risk you're wanting to
That's
take?
true.
That's why we advise that they stay here.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been through that with, a family or two on
Hmm.
my caseload where they wanted to bring the person home, but the hospital was like, well, they're not going to
Hmm.
necessarily like there's a
Hmm.
good chance that they might not even survive the
Hmm.
ride home, in even an ambulance,
Hmm.
to take them home.
Correct.
So
Right.
then the decision had to be made. We don't want to chance that. We would feel horrible.
Mhm.
So,
And
mm,
you brought up a good point too, Ashley, that I didn't mention. It really just even depends on, number one, the type of loss, but also how many. Like, is it one loss that is a horrible experience for everybody? Like, I'm not downplaying that, but when people have a loss and then a month or two later another loss and then a month or
Mm.
two later another loss, I mean, and it's this, aggregate, um, and grief that's
yeah.
just compounded and compounded and compounded.
Yeah.
So of course their stressors are going to be different.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
it's really important. People just have to look, the outsiders just have to look at the whole picture, and
Right.
try and evaluate, and not put their own nose in other people's business kind of
Mm-hmm.
mentality. It's just really very, very, decisions are so hard to be made when individuals and families are going through these decisions, and they're making the decisions that are the best for them at the time. And
Right.
Right.
if it was a month later, a year later, maybe the decision would be different. But what they're making now is based on the knowledge that they have and the place that they're at in their life. And friends and family really need to support and not try and tear apart their sense of worth and sense of self and integrity by belittling
Right.
what their decisions are.
Very
Yeah.
good point.
So,
Yeah, very good point. So I'm going to let Ashley close the program out. Ashley, take as long as you need, but Ashley's not actually going to close the program out because our special guest will have a nice little poem that she wants to read us at the end. So Ashley,
Yes.
you take over.
So don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. I'm Ashley.
I'm Rob.
And Mary Ellen, take us away with the poem.
all right. And just once again, I want to thank you for all of your viewers. You could be doing something else right now, and you chose to spend your time with Life Rewired podcast. So for that, we are all very, very appreciative. I found a poem when I was looking for loss and grief poems, and it was written by a man named Howard Thurman, and it's called "I Will Light Candles This Christmas." And I would like to edit the title, and I would call it "I Will Light Candles This Holiday," because I really don't want to just focus on the religious aspects of people who celebrate Christmas.
Sounds good.
So here we go. I will light candles this holiday season, candles of joy despite all sadness, candles of hope where despair keeps watch, candles of courage for fears ever present, candles of grace to ease heavy burdens, candles of love to inspire my living, candles that will burn all year long.
Wow.
Love it. Love
So
it.
with
Love
That's a
it.
that,
great poem.
so with that, again, his name is Howard Thurman. If you want to look up any of his work.
Okay.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, my Nothing but best to you, Mary Ellen, Mom.
Thank you both. Thank you both.
We'll see you
Thanks, Mom.
guys next week.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Just re-inspired. This is me, my life rewired.